So, welcome to everyone who came over for this session about storytelling. The first thing I want to ask is tell me in the chat how many of you are in business, like you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or thinking about starting a business, or in some way, shape, or fashion, you have some type of brand. If you could give me a yes or a no in the chat, that kind of lets me know who's here, who's in the room. Okay, we got CEO. Yes, awesome. Yes. We got a few people. Okay, good. Somebody just received their LLC for their coaching business. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you for those of you who were able to respond. I know some of you might be on the road and you got that little earbud in and you're listening. I get it. So the purpose of this session is really to hone in on how you can become a more impactful storyteller. Here's the reason why, especially for those of you who are in business and or those of you who are going to be taking stages, even if it's for your company or corporation, is that people remember and repeat stories, not bullet points. So just jot that in your notes. People remember and repeat stories, not bullet points. Okay. So we're just going to kick off with that profound aha that you could give a 45-minute speech. You can give an hour speech. And I promise you, most people will not remember what you said unless they refer back to their notes. But what they will remember without referring back to the notes are the stories that you shared. How many of you were here for my morning keynote? Was anybody actually in the room for the morning keynote? And do you remember any story that I shared this morning? While you do that, I'm going to queue up my PowerPoint so we can jump right in and I can give you some great content. So, do you remember any of the stories? For those of you who were here, do you remember any of the stories that I shared? I shared a couple stories this morning. Let's see. Let me scroll down. Yes, yes. So, Wajiha, I believe Khan said, loved your keynote about your background and being from Baltimore. Yeah, I shared a story about my mom and how she had this cherry wood table in our dining room, and she would tug at the left and tug at the right, and then there would be this gap in the middle, and she would take, yes, Christine. Christine said about that dining table. Absolutely. And she would take that leaf and she would extend the table that way. That was a story, right? And then someone said your Morgan State story. Yeah. Your plastic furniture store. Absolutely. So there were several stories, and you remember that. Even if you don't remember the highlights of the bullet points, what will happen is you will share a story and people will connect what the takeaway was from the story that you shared. So that's why we say that it's important that you take the time to craft your stories carefully so that people are taking away exactly what you want them to take away. So here I am. This year will be 15 years in the speaker industry. I have had the privilege of traveling all over the world to speak. I've spoken in South Africa, India, France, the United Kingdom. Last year, I did an international speaker summit in Athens, Greece. This year, I'll be going to Barcelona, Spain to do my international speaker summit. I've spoken in Turks and Caicos, Jamaica, Bahamas. Like there's a laundry list of places that I've had the opportunity to share my voice. I've done 2 TEDx talks, which is usually like kind of the pinnacle for speakers. That's what every speaker wants is that TEDx stage. I've had the blessing of doing that twice. I've spoken for big companies this year. I was the opening keynote for Keep, which used to be Infusionsoft, which is a CRM. They had their PartnerCon event, and I was their keynoter this one year, their opening, and then the next year I was their closing keynoter. I've spoken first on stages like NASA, Capital One, Prudential, Verizon, Export Import Banks of the United States. This was probably one of my favorite speaking opportunities out of 15 years. And this was when I was in Pretoria, South Africa. And I got to pour into and speak life into young girls who look like me, to remind them of their greatness, remind them of their gifts, and to remind them that they are not the sum of their current situation or circumstance, that you can always choose a different destiny. This here was an event that I hosted just a couple years ago. I don't know if you can see all the way over there to the left on that little, or the right, but I hosted this event, facilitated it, and hosted it with Lisa Nichols, Trent Shelton, and Gloria Mayfield Banks right here in Washington, D.C. And we had about 3,000 people who came to this event, again, just pouring into others and reminding them of the power and the impact of their voice. So all that's so juicy, right? I always like to say I'm in my juicy chapter 14/15 of my journey, but it's important that you understand it didn't start there. So in 2009, before I launched into this whole speaker journey, I actually was a legal secretary and had done that for 15 years. So every day I went to a 10 by 10 cubicle and shuffled papers and answered phones and looked over documents in these high level positions as a secretary, legal secretary in corporate America. My last stint in corporate America was back in 20, I ended up walking away 2014. And I was actually the legal secretary for the general counsel of Amtrak Train Company. So very highly positioned. The challenge was I didn't have the freedom that I desired. My freedom that I desired was time freedom, financial freedom, and creative freedom. I had become a mom of three, and I really wanted to be fully present and engaged in my kids' lives. I wanted to walk them up to school every day and pick them up in the afternoon. And of course, in my mind, I had this vision of like us holding hands and me, y'all know how you see on TV, that I wanted to like hold hands and swing hands with my kids walking up to the school, skipping. Yeah, you first of all, that might last in like till they like in second grade. Then they like, no, mommy, especially once they get in high school. And right now I have two high schoolers, a 17 and 18-year-old son. My 18-year-old will be graduating next month from high school. My baby boy will be graduating high school next year. He's a junior right now. And my oldest, my 21-year-old daughter, just graduated college. She graduated from Full Sail University, which is a media and entertainment university in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So we literally just got back from her college graduation. So I wanted to be very present for my kids as they were growing up. I didn't want to miss out on the important parts of life. To this day, yeah, I still drive my sons to school every morning and I pick them up every day from school every day. They 17 and 18. And you know what they say? Oh my God, mommy, I'm so glad we ain't got to get on the school bus, on the cheese bus. So there's a value in it for them. There's a value in it for me. And then in that same year in 2009, that's when I decided I really wanted to become an entrepreneur in some shape, fashion, or form. I didn't come from an entrepreneurial background. I didn't have a degree in business. I just had a drive. And as I mentioned in the keynote, a hunger, like Les Brown speaks of, for wanting control of my own life. So in 2009, I actually started a t-shirt business. And here's me at that t-shirt, doing the t-shirt business at an event. I was vending there, and I would do that like on the weekends, some evenings, trying to just get my feet wet as an entrepreneur to figure out what the heck is this entrepreneurial thing all about. That led me to my very first speaking engagement, which was at Morgan State University for their women conference. That was on September 18th, 2010. And y'all, can I tell you that when I did that speaking engagement, I was terrified. I was nervous. I was questioning why I said yes. But afterwards, or I'd say, dare to say, even during the speech, I knew. I knew that that was something I was good at. I knew that I wanted to master it though. And I knew that my story could make an impact because all I really did was I shared my story of where I was, but where I wanted to go, what I was doing to get there, the risks that I was taking, the leaps that I was taking. And as I looked out into the audience, as I was giving that speech, I could see the women like taking copious notes. And I'm turning around like, wait, they taking copious notes from my speech? And then I could see some of them like wiping tears from their eyes from hearing my story and my tenacity and drive of being a woman who grew up in poverty in an inner city housing project to landing a job as a full-time secretary to still feeling like I'm not done. My best is still in front of me. And that was the moment I knew I wanted to make people feel that way the rest of my life. And I wanted to get that type of satisfaction and fulfillment by walking in purpose for the rest of my life. So what just happened in the first 7 minutes that I've been speaking to you? What just happened? Somebody tell me. What just happened in the first 7 minutes or so of us being together in this presentation here in this breakout session? What did I just do? Somebody tell me in the chat. Hello, I just told you a story. I told you a story of where I was and where I am now. And I'm looking at some of your responses and there's clapping in the emojis in the chat. There's oh my God, amazing. Right? Like literally you're getting something from the story. I haven't even given you any talking points yet. I haven't given you any takeaways. I haven't given you anything to chew on. But already what I've done is I have made a heart-to-heart connection with you, hopefully in some way, because now you see me, hopefully, the intention is, yeah, there's all this great stuff about my sexy chapter 14 and 15 now, and all the great things I'm doing now, and I'm traveling the world. But I can't only tell you that. I must tell you, as a part of magnetic, impactful storytelling, I must share with you, where did it start? So it's the messy part and it's the triumphant parts. Storytelling is just that. It's a powerful tool that creates an emotional connection, builds trust, differentiates you because nobody has your exact story. Even if they have a story that's similar, your perspective and your experience is unique to you. Storytelling is when you are simplifying complex ideas into a story that people will remember and repeat. And storytelling is when you strengthen your leader, it strengthens your leadership and your influence. That's why we're having this conversation. So at the end of the day, storytelling is when you are reaching the hearts, not just the minds of people that you are speaking into. Okay. And that you are speaking in front of, whatever the platform is. It might be you on a big stage in person. It might be you on a virtual platform similar to this. It might be you on a podcast. But you must incorporate stories if you want to be unforgettable. Because people, and even Maya Angelou said that. She said, people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Stories evoke emotions that give people a certain feeling, and that's what they will never, ever be able to forget. Here's what I need you to understand as it relates to storytelling. There are two types of stories, primarily whenever you are, again, on a podcast being interviewed, on media being interviewed, on a live stage, on a virtual platform. Doesn't matter if you're doing a webinar, if you're doing a small boot camp event, there's a signature story and there are supporting stories. Okay. So let me give you the difference. And I should say supporting stories because you can have more than one supporting story. So a signature story is kind of the story of your life. And I'll give you this in just a moment. I'm actually going to give you four core types of stories. But it is that story that you tell over and over and over and over and over and over again. And you tell it with the same enthusiasm and passion and end result that you want to achieve every single time. Like you can't get sick of telling your own story. It is the story that most connects with the people that you feel you are called to serve. I don't know how many of you know Les Brown, but how many of you are familiar at all with him and with his story? Give me a yes or no in the chat. How many of you are familiar with Les Brown's story? I'm just waiting to see how many people type yes. Okay. We have Victoria. Anybody else familiar with Les Brown and his story? Okay, well, look, I'm going to challenge you, Gladys, to look him up and look up his story. But we do have several people. So the only reason those who are saying yes, the only reason that you know his story is because he's been telling the story for 50 plus years. He just turned 80 years old. He's one of the world's greatest motivational speakers. And he's been telling the same signature story about being Miss Mamie Brown's baby boy, about him and his twin brother being born into poverty. They got this, their mom, who they call mom, adopted them. And he goes through that whole story. Well, that's his signature story. And people who are familiar with him, they know the story like the back of their hands because he's told it over and over and over again. If you're familiar with Lisa Nichols or anyone that you follow, you typically will know what's the story of how they got to where they are. That is your signature story. And that's the story you want to relive, retell, and repeat over and over and over again, but always as though it's your first time telling it. Then there are what we call supporting stories. And supporting stories is when you're given a presentation, you're given a webinar, you're given a speech, you're talking to media, and maybe you're on, let's say if you're on television, if I'm going to be on Fox 5 here local, or Fox 45 or any of the news stations, and I have a certain topic that I'm speaking on, my supporting stories would accompany whatever my talking points are for that segment. Now, anybody who's ever done media or news, you know that news segments are usually very brief. Most times when I go to the news, my segment might be 5 minutes. If they give me a longer segment, it could potentially be 7, but most times it's in the 3 to 5 minute range. So what I'm trying to do is give some very core talking points, but I really want to kind of add into there a brief story so that the people who hear it and are watching the news remember what I said. Most of them will not remember the bullet point, but they'll remember the story that connects to the bullet point. Does that make sense, everybody? Your supporting stories can change based on the audience. So, for instance, if I am speaking to a group of young people, my supporting stories for my talking points, even though they might be the same talking points, would be very different for a group of college kids than it would for people who are my age, 50 and over, right? Because the same stories are not going to impact the audience in the same way. Let me give a quick example. If I were sharing the talking point that, hey, make sure that you create not just a to do list, but create a today list because tomorrow's not promised. So most of us spend time writing out a to-do list. This is what I'm going to do in 6 months, and this is what I'm going to do in a year, and this what, right? And I encourage people, don't just do that list, do the today list. What are you going to do today that's going to get you closer? That's going to start creating the legacy today in case your tomorrow doesn't come. Now, if I'm sharing that as a talking point, and I have a group of young people I'm sharing that with, but then I have a group of 50 and over. When I talk to the 50 and over group, the story that I typically will pull in is the story about losing my father on Thanksgiving Day in 2009. He was 59 years old. He passed of a massive heart attack in his sleep. That was the first phone call I got on Thanksgiving Day. So, of course, Thanksgiving has never been the same since then. 59. Now, why would I not? You guys talk to me in the chat. Why wouldn't I necessarily share that story to drive home the point about making a today list for young people? Why wouldn't I use that same story? Anybody have any thoughts about why I wouldn't use that exact same story about losing my dad, 59 years old, Thanksgiving Day? Yes. Why doesn't it resonate though? Why doesn't it resonate? And thank you so much to Victoria for the condolences. Why doesn't that wouldn't that story resonate with young people? Yes. Yeah. Come on. Is it Elia? Because they are young and they think that they have so much time. Absolutely. They think they're invincible. They're like, we ain't gonna die. Like you remember when you were 18, you were not thinking about death. You weren't thinking about a life insurance policy. So, and to them, let me say this as well as a mom to two teenagers and a 21-year-old, they think we old. They think 51 is old. Y'all do know that, right? Like my kids call me old. I'm like, first of all, I am not old. I'm seasoned, but I am not old yet. I'm 51. So that to them, the 59-year-old, my dad died at 59, like, oh, he was old. It was his time. But me, I know that was young. Okay. Now let's go over to the young people. So I either have to find some other story or way to emphasize to young people that your tomorrow is not promised. So I'm talking to kids who they don't really have any concept of, okay, my tomorrow really is not promised. Well, with them, the story that I would share would be that in 2020, August 22nd, 2020, my biological twin sister's baby boy passed away. Jordan Alexander Cofield. He was 20 years old. He died in a motorcycle crash on 795. He was everything. He was fine. Like the girls, we couldn't keep the girls off of the boy. He was fine. He was on a full ride scholarship at Morgan State University. He was an academic scholar on the dean's list. He was an academic scholar, the starting wide receiver for the Morgan State Bears. The NFL was already looking to recruit him. Jordan was full of life. He loved life. He was just getting started. And in the blink of an eye, he was gone. All the dreams, all the hopes, everything that we were looking forward to seeing him accomplish, gone. So the question becomes, what legacy did you create today in the event your tomorrow doesn't come? See, that's going to land differently, right? That's going to land on them differently because now it's close to home. They like 20. Wait, he was in his junior year at Morgan State. Wait, he's just like me. And that's what you want to create. That's magnetic storytelling, is when you can have someone hear your story and say, oh my God, he or she is just like me, or that story resonates with me. If it could happen to him, it could happen to me. So let's get into some of the questions that you want to ask yourself as you're thinking about what stories would I share when I'm speaking to a group or if I'm on a podcast and being interviewed about my journey. Number one is, will this story that I'm choosing make the greatest connection with this audience? So again, you have to consider who is the audience that you're pouring into. Number two, is this story relevant, relatable, and timely for this audience? Meaning, a lot of what I do, I have an organization called Global Speakers University, GSU. And through GSU, I teach and train new, emerging, aspiring, and even seasoned speakers to increase their confidence, increase their impact, to be able to be more impressionable and engaging on stage. Well, when we went through COVID, before we went through COVID, I was teaching them how to maximize their use of the stage, amplify their voice on stage, on live stages. But once COVID came, yeah, I couldn't teach them the same thing because that wasn't relevant anymore. Why? There were no live in person stages. Every in person stage that I had was gone. But guess what I could teach them? How to now be engaging, captivating, and compelling on virtual stages. So almost every corporation that had hired me to speak in person now had changed to a virtual platform. So now I was teaching them, how do you utilize your body, because body language is 55% of what the audience receives from you. How do you utilize gestures, hand gestures, and facial expressions, and the way you come in and out of the camera, how you make the audience feel like you're talking directly to them by looking. Those were some of the strategies that I was starting to teach. Okay, does that make sense? That's what I mean when I say, is this story and this content that I'm sharing relevant, relatable, and timely for the audience and based on what's happening in the world landscape? Number three, does this story reinforce the talking point? Whatever the main talking point is, that story should come back and it should reinforce that talking point. Next, does this story allow me to be vulnerable? Sometimes people who are speaking experts, they have a challenge with being vulnerable on stage. One of the questions I get asked all the time is, Dr. Cheryl, is it okay for me to cry on stage? And I'll say this, it is absolutely human for you to have emotions. The challenge is making sure that you have controlled emotion. What I mean is, for a long time, I did not share the story about losing my father on stage. I wouldn't share that on stage because I didn't have control of my emotions. And what you don't want to do is share a story, take an audience down very low, and now you crying like your ugly, ugly cry. Like people stopping, okay, can we stop the speech for a minute? Can somebody take her some tissues? Right? Because now the focus is more on your emotional well-being and mental well-being than the speech. And really, your job as a speaker or expert who's pouring into others is to leave the audience feeling more hopeful. So we have an expression in speaking where we say, take them low, but don't leave them low. You have to pull them out of the low point of whatever the speech is. And so, yes, emotion is absolutely acceptable, but it needs to be controlled emotion. Next question you want to ask yourself, am I willing to relive and retell this story? So that's a big part of choosing what your signature story is. Is it something that I want to rehash? Because as I'll share with you in just a few moments, you're going to take yourself back to that moment in time. That's all stories are. It's a moment in time. And you're going to relive it so that the audience can relive it with you as if they were there. So if it's not a story that you want to share over and over and over for the next 30 years, don't choose that as your signature story. All right. Next question you're going to ask yourself, am I willing to share this story with the same passion every time I share it? That's what you want to focus on. Now, there are 4 story types that resonate the most with audiences. There's an origin story, an underdog story, a comeback story, and a redemption story. These tend to have the greatest impact on audiences. This is when you're taking a deep dive. The audience is feeling it. They feel moved emotionally, but also then you follow up with logical reasoning of how they're going to incorporate whatever it is that you learned through the story into their own lives. Because this is what's important that you always remember. You might want to write this down. Your story is about you, but it's not for you. It's about you because you went through it, whatever the situation was, whatever the moment in time was, the experience, but it's not for you. You are meant to come back and share the lessons learned with someone else so that they can, number one, know that they're not by themselves and going through whatever they're currently experiencing. And number two, they can also know that there is a way out of whatever they're currently experiencing. If it's a pain or a problem, that there is something better on the other side of it. And they're only going to know that because you're going to share your unique authentic experience. So let me break down for you what each one of these stories consists of, okay? Number one, when we talk about an origin story, this is when you're detailing the foundation of a person, it might be you, a company, a movement, an idea. So now you're sharing, what was the initial inspiration? How did I get started? What were the challenges that I faced? What were the early action steps that I took that led me to where I am today? It's almost like what I did when I started this session. I went back and shared with you, hey, for 15 years, I worked as a legal secretary in corporate America. I was in a 10 by 10 cubicle, right? XYZ. I wanted time freedom, financial freedom, creative freedom. That's my origin story of how I got to where I am today as this internationally renowned TEDx speaker. Okay, so you can choose that as your signature story. Do you have a brand that you've built or a company that you've built? Or are you somewhere now in your life that is vastly and drastically different from where you were? or the person that you were. That would be identified as your origin story. Second type of story, an underdog story. This is when it features someone who is perhaps at some type of disadvantage compared to other people, but they managed to still achieve success against all odds. They've defied all the odds, whether it was physical odds, situational odds, societal odds. And now this person is at the top or climbing and getting to the top, to the peak of where they want to be. So this type of story, an underdog story, really emphasizes qualities like grit, tenacity, and perseverance. Is that your story? Did you go through something, experience something, accomplish something where you were disadvantaged over other people, but you beat all the odds, you defied the odds, and you still got to where you wanted to be? Then your story might absolutely be an underdog story. Next is the comeback story. All right. This is revolving around a person who overcame some type of significant setback or failure, and they still achieve what they wanted. This focuses on resilience, like your bounce back muscle, you getting back up, determination, the process of becoming stronger than you were before. Is that descriptive of your story in life, or some situation that you've been through in life where you got knocked down? Maybe you lost everything financially and you had to rebuild and you came back stronger than you were. Yes, Jennifer, a glow up story. Absolutely. You came back stronger than you were before. And then last but not least, number 4 is a redemption story. This is for those people who have made some type of mishap, mistake, wrong choice, but then they undergo this transformative journey in their life and they make amends for what that bad choice or mistake or decision was that they made. This is typically a story that focuses on forgiveness, change, the power of second chances. So think about someone who is someone who becomes addicted to drugs and they made bad decisions, and maybe they during that period they stole from people that they love the most. And I'm sharing this because I actually have clients who have this story. And but then they changed their entire life around. They went through the process of becoming clean, and now they hold down a job, a full-time job, and they're productive members of society. And now what they want to do is they want to share their story, but they want to help other people who are either on that path or who are already taking the path, but are trying to now get their lives together and come clean as well. So kind of decide out of those 4, if you were to share a core story that you feel would resonate with people, which would yours be? Would it be an origin story? Would it be an underdog story? Would it be a comeback story? I wanted to show them all to you. Or would it be a redemption story? Who's willing to share in the chat? Just tell us which one out of the 4 would most signify what your story would represent. An origin story of where you started, where you were, and where you are now, or a brand that you've built, or an underdog story. Again, that's when you had some type of disadvantage over others, but you beat all the odds. A comeback story, you failed, you had some significant setback, but you came back stronger, or a redemption story. Let's see what people are saying in the chat. Let's see. Oh, that's a great question. Someone said, is there ever a blend? So yeah, there can be pieces of the story that is a blend. So maybe your origin story has a little bit of redemption in it. So it's not that you can't have, but most of us have a predominant, I would call it your predominant story is usually in one of the categories. It's almost like for those of you who might have ever taken the DISC assessment, right? Or any type of personality assessment, you usually have a predominant personality style, and then you have remnants of or elements of the rest. This very much is the same way. Okay. A redemption story helps add humor and the story is more digestible. Okay, that it can be seen that way, it can be viewed that way. Yes, so everybody's asking, can you have some of each? Yes, you absolutely can. But what is the overarching thing? So I would not consider my story to be a redemption story, right? Because it wasn't like I made a bad decision and I was in a gang and then I got out of the gang and then, right? Or I started drugs and then I stopped taking drugs. So I'm very clear that for me, the redemption story is not a part of my story, right? If I talk about a comeback story, well, I'm always bouncing back from things, but the core of my story is not based on a comeback. It wasn't like, oh, I got knocked down and I started my business or my journey because I got knocked down and now I'm trying to make my way back. I wasn't on top of the world and then I lost everything and I had to rebuild it. Right. I'm trying to give you guys like some examples of what it can look like for you to identify what's the predominant story type. Underdog. So I would consider this to be, these are just examples, someone who, their start was really challenging. Yes, I had a challenging start because I grew up in poverty in an inner city housing project with a dad who was an alcoholic. But I still wouldn't consider myself to be necessarily, maybe there's a remnant of underdog, but I would think someone who had been raised in foster care and they had been in 10 homes by the time they were 10 years old. That's an underdog story. Or someone who they have all use of all their faculties, but then they are in a car accident and they lose their limbs or they lose their legs or now they're wheelchair bound and they became a paraplegic. That actually happened to my dad. Right. But now he comes back or she comes back and does all the things people said that they would never be able to do. That's like an underdog story. Like, oh, everybody counted you out. Everybody thought, oh, you will never. That's what that is. And then the origin story, again, is kind of the start of. So that's my story. My story really is more of an origin story. Here's where I was. Here's what was happening in my life. I wanted something different. I wanted freedom. I wanted to be present and active in my kids' lives, dot, dot, dot. And then the remainder of my story. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more insight into how you can kind of determine which one is your predominant story. Now, there's something called narrative transport that is also an important part of enhancing your storytelling skills. This is when, as I've mentioned several times, you are sharing the story in such a way that the audience is becoming emotionally and cognitively absorbed in your story. And what this does, it enhances their enjoyment of the story. It makes them feel like they were there when it happened. We do that through something called show versus tell. So whenever you are relaying a story, which again is usually a moment in time, you want to show the story versus tell the story. I'm going to give you an example. Okay. I'm going to stop my share real quick. I'll come back into the share, but I'm going to show you, I think I have time for this. I'm going to show you the difference between tell a story, show a story. And then I'll give you my 5-step framework of how you can become a more impactful storyteller. Okay. All right. So I mentioned the situation about my dad. So let's say I'm in a speech and I am talking about, it's so important that all of us make sure that we live every moment to its fullest, that we create not just a to-do list, but a today list, because tomorrow's not promised. I know that firsthand because in 2009, my father passed away of a massive heart attack in his sleep. He was only 59 years old. We did not expect that. I did not expect that was going to be the first phone call that I got that morning. But sure enough, he was gone in the blink of an eye. And what that made me realize is that life is short, life is precious. We hear it all the time. But now I had a deeper, more significant connection to what that saying and that phrase really means and feels like, that life is short and life is precious. And it made me rethink how I was living my own life. Okay. So in that, I just told you the story. What did you learn by me telling you the story? What were some of the facts that you heard or the details that I told you in that story? If you can type it in the chat. What were some of the things that you heard about the story, like the facts that I shared from me telling you the story? And there's a reason that I'm asking that. Yes. Thank you, Christina. Yes, he was 59. Yes, it was thank you, Kathy, that his death was unexpected. Yes, that it was the first, right. Yes, it was the first phone call I got that day. Yes, how it made me see life different. Exactly. So the reality is you got facts. You got facts in the story. But I want you to see the difference in if I show you the story. So again, I'm going to go on the same premise of I'm talking to the audience about creating a to-do list, a today list, not just a to-do list. So every single one of us in this room, we need to focus not only on creating a to-do list, but create a today list. Why? Well, because tomorrow is never promised to any of us. I know that we hear the expression all the time, life is short and life is precious, but sometimes we hear that expression and it goes in one ear and out the other. I was the same way until November 26, 2009. I'll never forget that morning. I looked out my blinds and it was rainy. I thought that the sun would eventually come out, but it didn't. Literally, the whole day was just soaked with rain all day long, beating against the window. I remember that day because I was preparing my 3 kids to get ready for the day. It was Thanksgiving Day, and we were gonna be going and visiting all of our different family members all across Maryland. Some were on in the Baltimore area, some were in the Waldorf area, but we were excited to go and spend time with family. I mean, after all, Thanksgiving is a day of thanks, family and friends, and being grateful for all the things you had. I was excited. I'll never forget, I was getting my kids ready, and at the time, they were only 1, 3, and 4. Yes, y'all, babies. But I remember as I was getting them ready for the day, my phone rang, my cell phone. I tried to get over to the phone quickly enough to get it, but by the time I got there, the phone had stopped ringing. So I went back to dressing the kids and I figured whoever it is, they'll call back. No more than 20 seconds later, my phone rang again. This time I had a little bit more sense of urgency because I figured it was the same person calling back. I went to the phone, I looked at my cell phone, and when I looked at the caller ID said, Cherie. Y'all, Cherie is my biological twin sister, and we are thick as thieves. So I started smiling even before I answered the phone. And then I answered, hey, girl, what's going on? Cheryl, Cheryl, girl, I got news to tell you. But she literally couldn't get anything else out. All I could hear on the opposite end of the phone was profuse sobbing. Sobbing like I've never heard my sister sob before. And I just kept calling her name, Cherie, Cherie, calm down. Take a deep breath. Please tell me what's wrong. Cherie finally got herself together enough to utter 2 words. Those words were, Daddy died. My sister was calling to tell me the devastating news that our father had passed away that morning at just 59 years young of a massive heart attack in his sleep. I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking, maybe she's not right. Maybe they're still working on him. Maybe he's not really gone. I remember telling my husband the news and saying, you got to watch the kids. I got to run down and make sure this is real. My father lived about 15 minutes from me. I jumped in my car. I drove to his house because I needed to know it was true with my own eyes. When I walked into his house, the medical examiner was there, and she was literally closing my father in a body bag. I will never forget that image. As I looked over to the door, my grandmother was there, and I could see the tears streaming down her face, as undoubtedly she knew that she had to now prepare a burial for her oldest of 8 children. I looked at my aunts and uncles, and everybody was emotionally distraught, including myself. As the medical examiner put my dad's body on the gurney and started to reel him out, she handed me this little bag, almost like a grocery bag. And when I looked into the bag, it was all of my father's personal belongings from off of his body. It was his rings, his watch. It was anything that he had in his pants pockets. It was his pocket knives, because y'all, my father was a little cray-cray. But I remember thinking when she handed me that bag, I sure hope that he lived the life he wanted to live in 59 short years, because there is no coming back and doing it again. There is no do-over. This life we live it's not a rehearsal. It's the real thing. And so as devastated as I was in that moment, it also was a moment of awakening to say, Cheryl, if you want to do something, do it today. Do it now. Don't wait. Don't create excuses. Don't put it off. Don't procrastinate. Live life now, because tomorrow is not promised. So today I challenge each and every one of you to live life now, to understand that your tomorrow is not promised. And so we don't just want to create to-do lists and things we're going to do 6 months or 12 months from now. We want to create what? Today lists. What will I do today to leave my unique fingerprint on this world? What will I do today to show God that I'm thankful for the gifts and the talents and the skills and the stories and the experiences he has given me. What will I do today to show that I am grateful for life today? Okay. Y'all see the difference? Not only that it's longer and it's more detailed, but what did you feel? Y'all tell me in the chat. And some of you already doing that. Thank you so much. What did you feel? What were the feelings that you got? Yes, thank you. You brought us into the moment. I felt like I lived that experience with you. That's the power of storytelling. Yes, Christina, we were right there with you. All your pain and emotions, the visceral response, how you were feeling. Absolutely. So that's what we mean when we say you show a story versus telling a story. And some of the ways that I did that was literally, I told you my sister, I looked at the caller ID, I called out her name, I told you what I was doing, I said it was raining outside. I literally just pulled you in by giving you vivid, creative, vivid expressions that were pulling you into the story. I cannot believe I'm quickly running out of time. So let's see if I can get through a few more slides. So again, this is what you just saw me to demonstrate to you. I developed the characters. I told you my sister and I were thick as thieves. I was smiling before I even answered the phone. I told you I had my young kids, their ages. I was pulling you into my world and my life. I used vivid descriptions. I engaged the senses with talking about what it was looking like and feeling like outside. I invoked emotions and I showed you versus telling you. So here's your 5-step storytelling framework. I'll go through this really quickly. Number 1, start with the setup, which is what I did. The who, the what, the where, the when. Paint the picture, introduce the characters, the main character, the sidebar characters, the secondary characters. What was the setting? What was happening from the very start? Step number 2, introduce the struggle. In some instances, it will be a conflict. What challenge or problem arose? In this instance, it was an experience. So it's not always a struggle. It might be an experience, a moment where you got bad news, the way I received that bad news. So every great story has some type of tension. You want to share what was the bad news? What was the turning point that created some type of emotional stake as a part of that story? Step 3, reveal the shift. What was the turning point? What changed? Describe the moment of insight, decision. In that instance, remember I mentioned to you that if you take them low, you don't want to leave them low, you want to bring them out. Who caught when I was bringing you out? It was something specific that I said that took it from being this deep place of pain to a space of hope. Anybody remember what I said? While you do that, I'm going to go to the next slide, but I'm going to come back and look in the chat. So you reveal the shift. Last 2, number 4, you share the solution. What steps did you take? How did you show up different? What happened as a result of the decision that you made? And last but not least, number 5, you end with a spark. What's the takeaway? You heard me do that. So I challenge each and every one of you not to just create a to-do list, create a today list. And here's why. That was the spark. That was the call to action. Going back. Okay, so I'll tell you really quickly. The moment of me pulling you out of the pain of the story was when I said that she gave me the bag and I looked in it and it was my father's watches and his rings and his things off his body. I said, and his pocket knives, because yeah, my father was a little cray cray. That was just a little bit of humor to break all of the pain that you had just experienced as a part of that story that I shared. So I want to honor time. I was told that I had to end at 1:30. I hope that you all enjoyed that. Hold on, somebody's asking me about slide number 4. Slide 4 was the step was share the solution, which is what did you do about it? The steps you took, how you showed up differently, what happened as a result. Hang on one second. Let me see if I can actually get it back up really quickly. Hang on. I'm going to try to put it up one more time. I think it's this one. Slide from current slide. Okay, so there it is. There's 4. Okay. Take a screenshot. There you go. So it's your time. This is my free gift to you. If you go to CherylEmpowers.com, CherylEmpowers.com, there's a signature story template. All you have to do is put your name and your email in that. That also puts you into my VIP community list, which means you'll just, I don't spam people, but I do let you know about free events that I'm hosting, free classes that I'm doing, some experiences that I do that are live in-person events. And I would love to have you guys as a part of my community in that regard. So if you're interested in that, being a part of my VIP community and getting the free template that'll help walk you through your signature story, just go to CherylEmpowers.com. There should be a pop-up that comes up. In fact, I put that on the screen as well. This is what it'll look like. So you see in the background, there's the website, but at the bottom, this little pop-up will come up and it'll say enter your email and receive my signature story template for free. Put your name, your first name, last name, and email, and you will get that absolutely free. I hope this has added value to you all. I hope that you go back and let the team know that this session was amazing. Like y'all got it. Like how many people we got here? 30 something people. I need 34 people telling the people that was amazing. All right. Thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Janelle. Thank you for being here, everybody.